After nearly 10 years of explaining Star Wars online, I've come across the same questions again and again. Today I'm going to try to answer as many of them as I can in one fell swoop. Here are the 40 most frequently asked questions about Attack of the Clones answered.
We made it.
Why was Captain Panaka replaced with Captain Typho? In-universe, Panaka stayed on Naboo and continued to work as the head of security for Queen Jamilia, even though he doesn't appear in Padme's scene with the current queen. He could have continued working as Amidala's bodyguard after she became a senator, but their relationship had become strained after the events of the Phantom Menace, which had driven him towards a more militaristic philosophy when it came to his planet's defenses. Gregor Typho was Panaka's nephew who lost his eye during the Battle of Naboo. He became Padme's bodyguard to replace his uncle. Behind the scenes, Hugh Corshi was offered the chance to reprise his role as Panaka in Episode 2, but he refused to accept unless he could see and read the film's full script. The request was denied, and the character of Panaka was replaced with Typho.
I will not let this republic that has stood for 1,000 years be split in two.
Has the Republic stood for 1,000 years or 1,000 generations? In A New Hope, Obi-Wan claims the Jedi were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic for 1,000 generations, but Chancellor Palpatine says the Republic has stood for 1,000 years. The Old Republic was a planetary alliance that began 20,000 years or so before the events of Attack of the Clones, which, is about 1,000 generations. The Jedi Order defended light and life and sided with the Old Republic during the Sith Wars, which ended 1,000 years before the movies. At that point, the Old Republic underwent like a governmental reboot, becoming a more official galactic republic. So both statements are true, from a certain point of view. What was the Loyalist Committee in Attack of the Clones? It was a group of politicians gathered together by Chancellor Palpatine to advise him during the Separatist crisis and help encourage loyalty to the Republic. Padme Amidala, Bail Organa, and Mon Mothma were all notable members of the group. Ironically, the group that Palpatine assembled to ensure loyalty grew suspicious of him as the Clone Wars went on and they watched him amass more and more power. Near the end of the Clone Wars, many of the Loyalist Committee joined a new group called the Delegation of 2000, which sought to end Palpatine's emergency powers.
Be careful, they're very poisonous.
What were kouhuns? They were arthropod creatures from the swamp planet Endaumoto. They had 56 legs and a stinger that could deliver a highly fatal venom that would cause death within minutes. Their victims would experience symptoms similar to a heart attack that would appear like natural causes in a murder investigation. In the wild, kouhuns would devour their prey by releasing a chemical in their saliva that would turn flesh into an easy-to-digest liquid. Outside of Attack of the Clones, they were seen again in The Bad Batch, once more used as a method of attempted assassination. Who is Ahmed Best's human cameo character in Attack of the Clones? His name was Ahck Med-Beq, a known criminal associate of Daniel Fay-Tony, Anthony Daniels' cameo character, who is also seen in the Outlander Club. According to legend stories, both of them were incarcerated on Coruscant, but escaped by hiding themselves in laundry. They acquired Republic Judicial Forces uniforms and were attempting to con patrons at the club when Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker entered seeking Zam Wesell. According to an interview with Ahmed Best, Ahck Med-Beq is related to his Jedi character Kelleran Beq, who appeared in Jedi Temple Challenge and The Mandalorian Season 3.
You wanna buy some death sticks?
What are death sticks? They're pretty much what you'd expect. Addictive drugs contained in the form of thin, glowing tubes. They were created from a distilled substance found in certain mushrooms on the planet Balasar, which is where Elan Sleazebaggano was from. Legend sources describe death sticks as mildly hallucinogenic, producing euphoria and visions of the real world displayed in bright colors. Each dose significantly shortened a user's lifespan, hence the name.
You want to go home and rethink your life?
I want to go home and rethink my life.
Did Elan Sleazebaggano go home and rethink his life? Yes, he did. Canon reference materials say he began pursuing a more honest life, and in the comic Star Wars Adventures number 25, we can see him in the background of a scene with a young girl looking much happier. In Star Wars Legends, he was seen shortly after the Clone Wars on Coruscant handing out pamphlets hoping to turn others away from drug use. So it would appear that Obi-Wan Kenobi's mind trick worked, and it should be noted that mind tricks are more powerful if they suggest a desire that the trickee already held themselves, so we can assume that Elan wanted to change and simply needed the tiniest nudge.
Who hired you? Tell us.
Why was Jango Fett's assassination plan so convoluted? Why did he hire another bounty hunter to send a droid to send poisonous millipedes to kill Padme? It is over the top, but I imagine all those degrees of separation were meant to protect Jango's identity and ultimately the identity of Darth Sidious himself. Also, this is Palpatine we're talking about. Every move he makes has multiple possible outcomes, and he's prepared for each of them. If Padme were to die in the assassination attempts, then he would have less opposition in the Senate for the Military Creation Act. If she survived instead, then it's time to push Anakin Skywalker back into her life and see what happens there. Not to mention, all this danger surrounding a senator from his homeworld continues to generate sympathy for him, just like the blockade of Naboo in The Phantom Menace. I don't think the successful assassination of Padme was a priority for anyone except for Newt Gunray.
Track down this bounty hunter, you must.
What happened to Jedi Master Yaddle in between The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones? She is conspicuously missing from the Jedi Council scenes in Episode 2. The animated series Tales of the Jedi finally answered that question 20 years after Attack of the Clones was released. In the wake of the Battle of Naboo and Qui-Gon Jinn's death, Yaddle began to see the failings of the Jedi Order and the Republic and stepped down from her role in the Jedi Council. She grew suspicious of Dooku when he announced he would not be attending his former Padawan's funeral, and so followed him to a meeting where he confronted Darth Sidious, blaming him for Qui-Gon's death. Yaddle attempted to turn Dooku against the Sith Lord, but instead he attacked and killed her in a lightsaber duel. With her death, he became Darth Tyrannus, the new apprentice of Sidious.
I haven't worked for a year to defeat the Military Creation Act, to not be here when its fate is decided.
Did the Galactic Republic really not have an army? Dipping into legend sources, they did during the Sith Wars, but when the Sith were eventually defeated and thought to be extinct, the Republic demilitarized for the next 1,000 years. In the Army's place, the Republic used smaller groups like the Defense Coalition during the High Republic era or Judicial Forces during the Fall of the Jedi era. Both groups were much smaller than a dedicated military, more suited for planetary conflicts rather than galactic ones. The crew that escorted Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn to Naboo at the start of The Phantom Menace were part of the Judicial Forces. The Separatist crisis would have been far too large a threat for Judicials to handle, so the Military Creation Act became an important issue in the Galactic Senate.
You want a cup of jawa juice?
What was Jawa juice? The drink was actually called Ardes. It was created on Tatooine, made up of bantha hides and fermented grains. It was considered to be alcoholic, so I guess Obi-Wan was getting started early in the day, but it's 5 o'clock somewhere in the galaxy. Also, it sounds like it was lightly alcoholic because we see it described a little more in the novel Freefall. There we see a 16-year-old Poe Dameron attempt to order a drink at a cantina. Hoping to avoid an unruly teenager, the bartender gives him a glass of Jawa juice, saying the worst it'll do is make Poe want to dance.
Oh, buddy!
How did Obi-Wan Kenobi meet Dexter Jettster? The novel Padawan tells us the story. Dex was part of a mining crew that traveled to the mysterious planet Lenara, which held a resource that was able to increase a being's strength and speed once ingested. There they discovered the Jedi Padawan Obi-Wan Kenobi and several younglings who had been stranded on the planet. When it became clear the leader of the mining crew, Logrib, planned on killing the Padawan to keep the planet secret from the Jedi and strand the children again once their job was done, Dex rallied the rest of the crew in joining Obi-Wan Kenobi in the fight to save the younglings and defeat Logrib. Jettster also helped relocate all of the younglings with their families, and from that encounter, a beautiful friendship was born.
Are you having a problem, Master Kenobi?
Who were the Lost 20 in the Jedi Order? The Lost 20 were all Jedi Masters who left the Jedi Order throughout its history. According to the audio drama Dooku Jedi Lost, they had become disillusioned with Jedi principles. Some became leaders or teachers, most simply faded into obscurity, and at least 2 became Sith Lords. Dooku, of course, became Darth Tyrannus, and a Jedi named Radaki became the ancient Sith Lord Darth Krall, thousands of years before the events of the prequel films. The group was more accurately referred to as the Lost, but by the time of Attack of the Clones, 20 Jedi Masters had chosen to leave the Order and were represented by statues kept in the Jedi Archives to remember how the Order had failed them. People often ask if characters like Anakin Skywalker or Ahsoka Tano became members of the Lost, but it's an important distinction to remember that only Jedi Masters joined that group. Many Jedi Padawans or Knights left the Order, but were not classified as part of the Lost.
My information, it should appear in this quadrant here, just south of the Rishi maze.
What was the Rishi Maze? It was a small galaxy located outside of the main galaxy far, far away that was home to the Republic. Its more official name was Companion Ahck, but its nickname came from the planet Rishi, which was located in the Outer Rim territories. That world was home to Rishi Station, seen as a defense point for the nearby Kamino and its cloning facilities. We don't know much more about that galaxy, but its mere existence paved the way for storytelling in the Ahsoka series. Ezra Bridger and Grand Admiral Thrawn are discovered to be stranded in a completely different galaxy, and the Rishi Maze was used as precedent for the existence of nearby galaxies.
Use your feelings, you must.
Are these younglings all using real lightsabers to train blindfolded? Isn't that insanely dangerous? Not to worry, they're just training lightsabers. Before they went on their gathering to Ilum to collect their personal kyber crystals, Jedi younglings trained with wooden swords or lower-powered lightsabers that wouldn't cause any lasting damage. Young Jedi Adventures shows that younglings would take their training sabers on missions and could even use them in low-stakes combat. Eventually, every youngling would go through the ritual of building their own real lightsaber, but even then they had the option of adding a low-power, non-lethal training mode for sparring sessions as seen in Star Wars Rebels.
Who could empty information from the archives? That's impossible, isn't it?
Who deleted Kamino from the Jedi Archives? The easiest guess was always Count Dooku, and that's also the answer. The animated series Tales of the Jedi even shows him doing it. Dooku left the Order about 20 years before the events of Attack of the Clones, or 10 years before the Phantom Menace, but he had a friendly relationship with the Jedi and was allowed to keep his lightsaber and visit the Jedi Temple. After becoming an ally of Darth Sidious and taking control of the clone army on Kamino, Dooku used his access to infiltrate the Jedi Archives and delete the planet from their records during the events of Episode 1.
200,000 units are ready, with 1 million more well on the way.
How did the Kaminoans become such good cloners? It was out of necessity. According to legend sources, Kamino suffered a great flood that nearly destroyed the Kaminoan people. They developed cloning technology to survive. When their society was stable again, they continued their experiments and even spread to other planets, establishing cloning facilities on worlds like Boravio. Although they were highly selective of the clients and cloning jobs they accepted, their reputation grew until Sifo-Dyas learned of their existence and placed the order for the eventual clone army.
Master Sifo-Dyas was killed almost 10 years ago.
What's the deal with Sifo-Dyas? The original plan for the story was for the name to be a clear pseudonym for Sidious, pronounced Sifo-Dyas, but a typo in the script altered his name to Sifo. One thing led to another and a new character was created. George Lucas initially planned to unravel the mystery in Revenge of the Sith, but the plotline was cut and finally revealed in the 6th season of the Clone Wars. Sifo-Dyas was a Jedi Master who had visions of the future that weren't always looked at favorably by the Jedi Council. As a member of the Jedi Council, he warned his peers of a coming galactic conflict. Shortly before the time of the Phantom Menace, he was dismissed from the Council as a warmonger. He took it upon himself to order the clone army from Kamino, which caught the attention of Darth Sidious. Having already begun working with Count Dooku, the two arranged for Sifo-Dyas' death at the hands of the Pike Syndicate. His whereabouts were unknown until the final days of the Clone Wars, when Plo Koon discovered the lightsaber of the missing Jedi Master.
Magnificent, aren't they?
Was Obi-Wan meant to find the clone army on Kamino? Was that part of Palpatine's plan? I think this is open for debate, and I see arguments for both answers. I would argue that he was not meant to find the clones, but that it wasn't a problem that he did. The Essential Guide to Warfare states that Obi-Wan Kenobi eventually discovered what was happening, but Sidious was untroubled. Dooku and Sidious went to great lengths to keep Kamino and the clone army a secret, and it would have been impossible to guess that a diner owner would have led Obi-Wan Kenobi there. But at this point in the clone army's development, the plan was too far along, and Sidious is always ready to adapt to new situations. So deep into the Separatist crisis, the Jedi and the Republic were willing to take the bait of a convenient, if not highly suspicious army at the ready. Now, if the Jedi had found Kamino 5 years earlier or something, then it might have been a problem. I also think Kenobi finding the clones on accident worked out in Palpatine's favor. I'm sure he had a plan to reveal their existence to the galaxy on his own, but having the Jedi do it makes the Chancellor seem even more like an innocent bystander. Who paid for the clone army? In short, it was the Sith. In Legends, the novel Darth Plagueis shows Plagueis manipulating Sifo-Dyas into placing the Order with his own funds under his public persona as a high-ranking member of the banking clan. I think something similar likely happened in canon. Dooku left the Jedi Order well before the clone army was ordered. When he reclaimed his position as Count of Sereno, he became one of the richest men in the galaxy. Maybe he convinced Sifo-Dyas to place the Order and even gave him the money for a down payment. Then Sifo-Dyas was killed, allowing Dooku and Sidious to take control of the project. The book The Essential Guide to Warfare says the clone army was then funded at least in part by Palpatine funneling billions of Republic credits through a maze of intermediaries to the Kaminoans.
They'll do their job well. I'll guarantee that.
Did Jango Fett know about Order 66? In Star Wars Legends, he definitely knew the true purpose of the clone army was to destroy the Jedi. After being hired for the job, Dooku straight up tells him, "Your clones will be the most formidable soldiers the galaxy has ever known. In time, they will be instrumental in the destruction of the Jedi." Jango held a grudge against the Jedi and wanted to wipe them out. In canon, we don't have such a definitive answer. Jango does give Obi-Wan Kenobi a smug look when he guarantees the Jedi his clones will do their job well, but the Age of Republic comics show us an alternate version of how he was hired by Darth Tyrannus. No mention is made of destroying the Jedi, but Dooku does applaud Jango's discretion, so it's possible he knew the clones would be used to destroy the Jedi Order. Personally, I don't think Sidious would tell a mercenary that detail unless he absolutely had to, but right now, I think the canon answer to this is up for debate. How about the Kaminoans? Did they know about Order 66? They definitely knew. In the Clone Wars Season 6, a clone named Tup has a malfunctioning inhibitor chip and executes Order 66 early, killing a Jedi in the middle of a battle. A Kaminoan scientist named Nala Se informs Prime Minister Lama Su of a preemptive execution of Clone Protocol 66, prompting him to reach out to Lord Tyrannus, whom he calls by name. But they seem to be under the impression Tyrannus himself is a Jedi, and that Order 66 was a safeguard against rogue Jedi. So they may not have known that the clone army was intended to one day wipe out all of the Jedi, even if they knew of its existence. But I also don't think they cared. They only seemed to care about doing their jobs well and getting paid. Is Jango Fett's armor made of beskar? Yes, we should assume that it is, even though you can see it bend and fold in some scenes. Mandalorian iron was first mentioned back in 1994, but beskar was far from prominent to Star Wars fans in 2002, not the way it is now thanks to The Mandalorian. So in Attack of the Clones, Jango Fett's costume wasn't designed for consistency as much as it probably was made for convenience and comfort. There were some deleted shots showing Jango deflecting Mace Windu's lightsaber with his gauntlets, but Legend sources used to say his armor was made of Durasteel. More currently, we can say that Jango's armor was made of a beskar alloy. In The Mandalorian, Boba Fett reclaims his beskar armor from Din Djarin and says it once belonged to his father. I would assume he is wearing the same repainted set of beskar. What happened to Kamino after the Clone Wars? The Bad Batch animated series tells us that story. The Empire discontinued their cloning contracts with the Kaminoans and refused to repay their debts, claiming that their original deal was with the Republic. Clone troopers were replaced with TK troopers and eventually stormtroopers. The cloners were no longer needed and were an unnecessary loose end, so the Empire destroyed the cities and cloning facilities of Kamino. But some Kaminoans were spared and forced to continue secretive cloning research for the Empire, like Project Necromancer, working to find a way to effectively clone a suitable vessel for Palpatine's spirit in the event of his death. We see in The Rise of Skywalker that those experiments never fully succeeded.
You are an idiot!
What happened to Watto after Attack of the Clones? We don't know much in canon except for the fact that he sold Obi-Wan Kenobi a humidifier for his hut when the Jedi in hiding moved to Tatooine, so I assume Watto stayed on the desert planet for the remainder of his life. If we jump over to Legends content, specifically the Star Wars Galaxy's MMO, that seems to be exactly what he did. He kept a junk shop on Tatooine at least up until the Battle of Endor. According to the book Tatooine Ghost, Anakin's childhood friend Wald eventually took over Watto's shop and renamed it Wald's Parts. But we know that's not true in canon because Wald and Jettster both left Tatooine after being liberated from slavery.
Shmi is my wife.
When did Shmi Skywalker meet the Lars family? We don't know exactly when, but it was less than 4 years after the events of The Phantom Menace. Beru Whitesun was part of a network that helped free slaves on her homeworld. She hired Shmi to repair a broken device and realized the woman's skills would be a great asset. Klieg Lars hired her from Watto on numerous occasions, pretending to have her work on his moisture evaporators, but instead they planned for her freedom, and they fell in love. Eventually, they were able to manipulate Watto into a wager that Klieg won, similar to how Qui-Gon arranged for Anakin's freedom. Shmi married Klieg and traveled to the Lars family home, where she and Beru developed a device to find and remove the chip that slavers placed inside her body, fulfilling a dream that her son once had. Why does Duel of the Fates play while Anakin searches for Shmi Skywalker? In the Gallery Making Of series for The Mandalorian Season 1, Dave Filoni explains the meaning behind the Duel of the Fates in The Phantom Menace. It's called that because it is literally a duel for Anakin's fate. If Qui-Gon Jinn survived, he would have been the Jedi Master and father figure Anakin needed, but he doesn't, so the boy is trained by Obi-Wan Kenobi, who at one point in the movie jokingly refers to Anakin as another pathetic life form. That duel represents a dramatic turning point in the story of Anakin Skywalker. Attack of the Clones gives us another important shift in the race to save Shmi Skywalker. If Anakin were able to reach her in time, maybe that would have stopped him from traveling down a dark path, believing he should be powerful enough to stop people from dying. Maybe he wouldn't have had such intense fears surrounding the possible loss of Padme. Anakin's destiny once again hangs in the balance during this scene, and so Duel of the Fates plays once again. In the documentary The Beginning about the making of The Phantom Menace, George Lucas talks about planning to reprise the song in the other prequel films because of how well it represents the inevitable nature of fate.
Our friends from the Trade Federation have pledged their support.
What was the Separatist Movement about? While they're often treated as the baddies of the Clone Wars, the Confederacy of Independent Systems was a legitimate political movement with very real criticisms of the Galactic Republic. Tales of the Jedi shows Dooku experience two different systems who were taken advantage of by their senators. The Phantom Menace and the blockade of Naboo also showed how ineffective the government had become. Rich core worlds received preference over the struggling Outer Rim, who gave taxes and support to a republic that offered little in return. The separatist planets wanted independence. They were joined by several corporations like the Trade Federation, Techno Union, and so on, who would profit from the war and could maybe get some tax breaks from the Republic in the end if they had more bargaining power. Dooku and Darth Sidious took advantage of the greed of the megacorporations and the legitimate grievances of the people to engineer a war that would result in the destruction of the Jedi and the Republic and leave them in charge. Separatists absolutely committed atrocities during the Clone Wars, but as the crawl for Revenge of the Sith states, there were heroes and villains on both sides.
Annie?
What did the Tusken Raiders do to Shmi Skywalker? They tortured and starved her. The novelization for Attack of the Clones says every day they came in and tortured her a bit more, prodding her with sharp spears or beating her with the blunt shafts and short whips. It was more than a desire to inflict pain, Shmi realized, though she didn't speak their croaking language. This was the Tusken way of measuring their enemies, and from the nods and tones of their voices, she realized that her resilience had impressed them. So that's what she experienced every single day for a month.
I killed them.
Why isn't Padme more bothered by Anakin's admission to slaughtering the Tusken Raiders? The book Skywalker, A Family at War says it's easier to excuse misdeeds perpetrated by the ones we love. Troubled as she was by the massacre of the Tusken Raiders, she could see that this act did not define Anakin's character, but was the result of immense grief and justifiable anger, a serious but momentary lapse in judgment. I think Padme was bothered by Anakin's actions, but love can blind people to a person's faults. She also sees that Anakin isn't admitting his crime with pride, he is disgusted with himself. And Padme doesn't know much about the Tuskens. All she's been told by Klieg Lars and Anakin is that they're vicious animals, so she might be taking that at face value. I don't think she's the kind of person to paint with that broad a brush, but that might be what she told herself to excuse what Anakin did.
Goodbye, my darling wife.
Who do the other graves belong to on the Lars homestead? We don't know for sure, but we can make a decent guess. Klieg Lars' parents, Leff and Greta, started the moisture farm we see in the movie. They also had another son, Klieg's younger brother named Eddern. He died when he was young, and Leff and Greta passed away shortly after. A morning, Klieg left Tatooine and traveled the galaxy for a time, where he met Owen's mother, Ika. She also passed away when Owen was very young, prompting Klieg's return to his family farm. Since Ica died off-world, I'll guess that the smaller grave is for Eddern, and maybe the larger headstone marks the grave of both Lef and Greta.
I'm not worried, R2. It's just I've never flown before.
Does Anakin steal C-3PO from the Lars family? No, C-3PO was his droid, given to his mother. I'm sure that in the wake of Shmi's death, Klieg and Owen Lars would have been willing to give the droid back to his creator. Considering how Owen treats 3PO in A New Hope, I wouldn't be surprised if he insisted Anakin take the droid. There was also a sequence shot for the movie where Padme would have been the one to actually finish 3PO with his coverings, which the Lars family hadn't bothered to do in a decade. That was cut for time, and 3PO's part was reshot, so he had the coverings for the entirety of the film, but my point is, I don't think 3PO was a huge priority for the Lars homestead. By the way, if you want to know why Owen doesn't remember 3PO in A New Hope, check out my FAQ for that movie.
If only Senator Amidala were here.
Did Mas Amedda know Chancellor Palpatine was Darth Sidious? Yes, he did. We don't know exactly when he was told, but the Darth Vader comics and several other stories have shown that he and Sly Moore both knew the full nature of the leader of the Empire and were aiding him throughout the Clone Wars. Mas Amedda's manipulation of Jar Jar Binks in Attack of the Clones was intentional. During the time of the Empire, he and Sly Moore competed with and undermined one another and even Darth Vader in hopes of grasping more power and favor with the Emperor. In truth, Amedda was largely kept around because he, too, was easily manipulated.
I thought you were the leader here, Dooku.
What is Dooku's full name? A lot of people think Dooku is the character's last name, but it's actually closer to his first. According to the audio drama Dooku Jedi Lost, thousands of years before Dooku's birth, his homeworld of Sereno went by a different name. It fell under the control of the Sith Empire until 8 of the planet's greatest families rallied against their invaders. Under the leadership of House Sereno, they defeated the Sith without any help from the Jedi Order. To honor the heroes, the planet was renamed to Sereno, and House Sereno became its rulers. Dooku was part of that lineage, so his full name would technically be Dooku Sereno. What happened to R2-D2's leg rockets? Why doesn't he use them at all in the original or sequel trilogies? The canon junior novelization for Return of the Jedi called Beware the Power of the Dark Side has the answer. When R2 has to simply roll off the side of Jabba's sail barge, he remembers a time when he could have fired his rocket thrusters and abandoned ship gracefully. But they haven't worked in ages, and his warranty is long expired. This works well with the Legends answer to this question. R2's rocket boosters were created by Brooks Propulsion Devices, named after Billy Brooks, the CGI artist that animated the droid's flying scenes in Attack of the Clones. The Empire shut the company down after the Clone Wars, so when R2-D2's boosters eventually ran out of fuel or broke, there would have been no way to repair or refill them, and so we never saw them in use again. What are the 3 arena beasts in the Geonosis arena? The rhino-like creature is called a reek. From the planet Ylesia, they were normally herbivores with yellow, gray, or brown skin. But if they were fed meat like the one on Geonosis, they would become more aggressive and their skin would shift to a deep red. The giant insect-like creature is an Acklay. Found on the planet Vendaxa, they were amphibious crustaceans that mostly lived in the water, but would emerge to land to hunt for food. Finally, the Nexu was the large cat-like animal. They were native to the planet Cholgana, but had spread to other worlds like Seleucami. They had 4 eyes that could sense body heat through infrared vision and quills on their back similar to a porcupine. As dangerous as they were, Nexus could be tamed and trained. Why is Mace Windu's lightsaber purple? The simple answer is because Samuel L. Jackson requested the color. The actor has said he wanted to be able to easily find himself during the Battle of Geonosis and asked George Lucas if he could have a unique purple blade. In Star Wars Legends, Mace was given rare purple crystals after helping the people of the planet Hurricane, and he used one of them in the construction of his lightsaber at the age of 28. A canon comic in the Age of Republic series shows that he constructed his lightsaber under the watchful eye of Huyang at a much younger age, presumably after bonding with a kyber crystal gathered on the planet Ilum. Purple blades were a rare sight during the time of the prequel trilogy, but in the High Republic era, we've seen more purple lightsabers in the hands of characters like Vernestra Rwoh. Whose lightsabers do Anakin and Obi-Wan use during the Battle of Geonosis? We don't have an answer for this right now, so all we can do is speculate. I think it's fair to assume there would be spare lightsabers lying around the Jedi Temple. Kanan Jarrus has a vision of a Jedi training dojo in Star Wars Rebels where several lightsaber hilts are hanging up on the wall, so maybe the Jedi Strike team brought a couple of spares just in case Obi-Wan and Anakin needed them. It's also possible that Nakanis Tasu and Sefjet Josal normally wielded 2 lightsabers and gave Obi-Wan and Anakin their extras. Or maybe they were the lightsabers of 2 Jedi that had already fallen during the battle. There are lots of possibilities, and none of them are confirmed.
You're gonna pay for all the Jedi that you killed today, Dooku.
How many Jedi died in the Battle of Geonosis? Star Wars reference books have established that 212 Jedi made up the strike team that traveled to Geonosis to save Obi-Wan, Padme, and Anakin. Adding Kenobi, Skywalker, and Yoda to the group brings the total up to 215. In the book Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade, we see that there were even more Jedi outside of the strike team, and Mace Windu notes that only 29 Jedi survived the battle, meaning at least 186 perished. But the book goes on to mention that over 200 Jedi had died, many of whom held the rank of Master. At best, that's a death rate of nearly 87% in only the first battle of the Clone Wars. Where did all the clones' weapons, walkers, and ships come from? Did Kamino make them too? The Kaminoans didn't have the facilities to manufacture vehicles and ships, so Darth Sidious contracted Rothana Heavy Engineering for the job. According to the Legends reference book, The Essential Guide to Warfare, they created Acclamator-class ships, the AT line of walkers, gunships, and more, all in the same secrecy as the clone army itself. Rothana was a subsidiary of the more well-known Kuat Drive Yards, which would eventually be the public manufacturers of the Galactic Empire's Star Destroyers and walkers. But prior to the Clone Wars, Rothana was a covert organization with its headquarters conveniently close to Kamino and the growing clone army it supplied. Who married Anakin and Padme? The marriage ceremony was performed by Maxeron Agalerga, a pontifex of the Brotherhood of Cognizance. He belonged to an order of hermits on Naboo. Thanks to his seclusion, he didn't know Padme or Anakin's true identities, and they used aliases during the ceremony. According to the Legends reference book Jedi vs. Sith, The Essential Guide to the Force, Maxeron did eventually discover who he had married, and passed the information on to one of Padme's nieces. I'm going to end this video with a question for myself, like I did with my Return of the Jedi FAQ when I asked why there are only 3 dots in the ellipses of the crawl instead of 4. Why, oh why, with all the technology of Star Wars, have they not developed better luggage? Anakin is seen carrying Padme's bags with his hands. We can put repulsor lifts on a baby's carriage, but not a suitcase? You're not even going to put wheels on your bags? And this isn't just an Attack of the Clones either. We saw Cyril Karn carrying his bags in Andor, and just, what? I honestly think it's funny. Just one of those little quirks of Star Wars, but it jumps out to me every time. But that brings us to the end of the 40 most frequently asked questions I've seen about Attack of the Clones. I'm sure there are more great questions I missed, so leave yours in the comments. If you liked this video, check out the ones I've already done answering 40 frequently asked questions for the original trilogy and The Phantom Menace, and I'm also hard at work on Revenge of the Sith right now. Make sure you catch it by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, following us on our socials, and please consider checking out our Patreon page for even more Star Wars talk. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.